I'm Seana Smith here at KPMG Women's Leadership Summit at Baltusrol Golf Club, home of this year's KPMG Women's PGA Championship. And the event that is taking place is bringing together the top female leaders across industries to tackle a massive issue, and that is the lack of women in leadership positions and how to improve that number. Well, I'm joined now by two trailblazers and themselves determined to help close that leadership gap. And Dr. Condoleezza Rice, a former National Security Advisor, former Secretary of State under the George W. Bush administration, also co-owner of the Denver Broncos. And we have Allyson Felix as well, the most decorated Olympian in track and field history, also co-founder of her shoe brand, Saysh. Allyson, Secretary Rice, great to see you both. Thanks so much for making the time for us.
Thank you.
Secretary, let me start with you. Just give us your sense of why we are where we are today in terms of the data the most recent data from McKinsey showing that women account for just about a quarter of C-suite positions, yet they make up about half of entry-level positions. Why haven't we seen more progress up until this point?
Well, the hopeful thing is that we've gotten to 25%. That is something to celebrate because we weren't there just a few years ago. And you always have to look at the pool. So the fact that we have 50% of women in, quote, entry-level positions, the real goal now is just to make sure that they progress into those positions of the C-suite. You can't sort of create top-level management out of thin air. You have to nurture it and bring it along. And I think efforts like KPMG here to make sure that women who are maybe even on the cusp of making it into the C-suite have the tools and the mentorship and the networks to make that next step.
Speaking of the tools and the mentorship here, Allyson, from your perspective in sports, the biggest barriers that are facing females in terms of the equality when it comes to pay, the equality when it comes to treatment, what do you think are the biggest challenges that women are still facing to this point?
Yeah, I think visibility is still a huge issue. We've made some movement on pay equity, but it's still an issue. And so we're still working to be represented fully. Maternal protections, something that I'm very familiar with, is a huge thing. The culture of sports and women not having to choose between motherhood and the sport that they love. So I think there's some really good momentum. I think a lot of positive things are happening, but there are some real challenges.
And Secretary, from your time with sports to government to the private sector, what do you think is that common theme just in terms of why we should be so encouraged about the future advancement of females in the workplace?
Well, we should be encouraged because we had too many firsts, meaning that not enough women had made it into those positions. And now we're starting to talk about, we've had 3 female secretaries of state. That's something really that we should celebrate. But we can't rest on our laurels because it's still hard, given what women face in terms of you walk into the room and somebody looks at you like you're in the wrong meeting. You have to be strong enough to say, no, I'm in the right meeting, and pretty soon you're going to know that. And that takes mentorship, and that takes having people help you along. I was really fortunate. I had great mentors. I will tell you something. We have this conceit that your mentors have to look like you. Well, if I'd been waiting for a Black female Soviet specialist role model, I'd still be waiting. And so sometimes you might have to, or you might find that your mentors don't look like you. As long as they advocate for you, as long as they see things in you that you might not even see in yourself, accept that mentorship and in a sense, earn it.
Who were your biggest mentors?
Oh, my biggest mentors by far were Dr. Joseph Corbell. He was Madeleine Albright's father, by the way. He was the professor whose course I took to get me from a failed piano major to somebody interested in international politics. And then a man named Brent Scowcroft, who would be National Security Advisor to George H.W. Bush, who really took an interest in my career. And he was the one who first brought me to Washington.
Allyson, you have also seen your fair share of success as the most decorated Olympian in the track and field in history. Who have you looked up to? Who has helped you get to where you are today sitting in this position?
Yeah, Jackie Joyner-Hersey has been a huge inspiration to me and a mentor who has really cared about my life, and invested in me. And that's really been huge. As you said, mentorship is so amazing. And especially as I transition from a competitive athlete into the business world, having someone to really navigate you through that space has been huge.
And speaking of transitioning here into the business world, you're the co-founder, I should say, of Saysh. How are you cultivating that culture that is necessary in order to train the next generation of female leaders?
Yeah, I think having a really diverse team, we're trying to do something that hasn't really been done, making shoes specifically to fit the form of the female foot when other companies aren't doing that. And so our mission aligns us. And so bringing everybody together with that core that we believe that women deserve better in every single aspect, and really fostering that environment.
Let's go back to what we touched on briefly, and that was pay and pay equality, or the lack thereof. And Secretary, as a co-owner of the Denver Broncos, you have a front row seat to what the National Football League is doing, but I know you closely follow professional sports. When do you think women will reach their equal pay day? We have seen some progress when it comes to what the women's national soccer team was able to accomplish, but we still got a ways to go.
Well, the remarkable thing for me is that the women's national soccer team even had to make that fight. I mean, they were by far the more accomplished, the ones that everyone wanted to watch. They'd won the World Cup. They put soccer on the map. Why were they even having to fight for equal pay? And I'm glad that they finally did, but it just says something. Now, on the other hand, I was on a panel a couple of years ago with Billie Jean King. She fought for equal pay in tennis decades ago, and women have been paid equally in tennis. And so it says to me that raising the issue, it says to me that making the case, I do believe that people want to see equality. They don't want to see people, the population doesn't want to see people disadvantaged. So when you learn that the women's soccer team was not receiving equal pay, pretty soon there's a lot of pressure to give them equal pay.
Allison, what has the conversation been like among your peers, athletes who are pushing for their moment and for their right to be paid what they should be paid?
I think we're seeing just the momentum of people speaking out. Like Dr. Rice said, there's power in that, and there's power in the collective. And I think athletes aren't really scared any longer to stay in their lane. They know that they can talk about issues that they're passionate about, and pay being one of those.
Secretary, when we talk about the advancement here of women, we're still waiting for the first female president. Now, we do have the first female vice president, Nikki Haley, also among those who are running for the GOP nomination. How confident are you that we will see a female president soon, and what is it going to take in order to see one?
Oh, I think we will have a female president. I think we again, when you look at where do we select our presidents from, with one notable exception, usually it's people who've been governors or senators. And so when you see the number of women governors, the number of women senators, Senator Clinton, when she ran, now you mentioned former Governor Nikki Haley, who was also UN ambassador. So are there any questions about her foreign policy chops? No. And so I think you'll start to see, as people move into these positions that are the places from which we take our presidents, that you'll start, eventually we'll get to a female president.
So what do you ultimately hope to see change for the next generation of females when it comes to sports, business, even through in government? What is the one thing that you would like to see change going forward?
When I think about my daughter and, the aspirations that she'll have, I hope that she doesn't have any limitations. I hope that she can go after what she wants, that she doesn't think twice because she is a girl, because she is a little Black girl, that those aren't barriers for her. And so that's my hope. And that's why I think we all do so much work and are so dedicated to really making this world better.
And Secretary Rice, similar question to you. What do you hope is the next wave of change for women who are growing up across the country or around the world too?
Yes, well, I hope that here in the United States and in the developed world, I would agree with Allison that we aren't even sitting here in a few years even asking the question. And I see in younger women expectations that I really never had. And I'm delighted to see that. But sometimes I think we almost talk about the barriers as if they're impenetrable, and they're not. And so I say to young women all the time, it's there for you. Go get it. And I hope we can get there. But, we have to remember, and I am a specialist in international politics, there are a lot of women in the world who are just trying to survive. And as we fight for women's rights here in the United States, I hope we don't forget how hard it is if you are living in a remote village in Cameroon, or if you are in a Guatemalan village trying to fight off gangs for your families. I sometimes think we get very focused on our problems and they seem immense, they're really not immense when you think about some of the challenges that women around the world have.
Yeah.